After we marry, life doesn't suddenly become easier. There's no background music, no applause, no moment where the world pauses and says, "You made it." What happens instead is quieter. We wake up next to each other on an ordinary morning. There's laundry to fold, bills to think about, moods we didn't plan, silences that don't always mean peace. And that's where love actually begins. Because love isn't proven in weddings, it's revealed in Tuesdays, in tired evenings, in how we speak when no one is watching. After we marry, I won't promise to be perfect. I won't promise to always know the right words. But I promise this, I will show up, especially when it's uncomfortable. I'll listen when you're quiet. I'll stay when things feel heavy. I'll choose patience when my ego wants control. Because real love isn't loud. It's steady. It's the decision to remain kind even when you're misunderstood. It's the courage to keep your heart open when it'd be easier to shut down. After we marry, I won't love you like a fantasy. I'll love you like a responsibility and an honor. Love, when it's real, doesn't arrive as a dramatic moment that changes everything forever. It arrives quietly, settles into your daily life, and then asks something of you again, without applause, without guarantees, without shortcuts, because commitment is not the continuation of romance, but the beginning of responsibility. And most people don't fail at love because they stop feeling something. They fail because they never learned how to stay when love stops entertaining them, because the truth is this: love is not sustained by intensity, it's sustained by intention. And after we marry, intention becomes the language we speak every day, in how we listen when we're tired, in how we respond when we feel misunderstood, in how we choose restraint over reaction, because commitment isn't about never wanting something else. It's about deciding that what you have is worth protecting even when temptation, frustration, or doubt knocks on the door. And it will knock quietly sometimes, loudly other times, disguised as boredom, disguised as comparison, disguised as the idea that happiness should always feel good. But commitment teaches you that happiness is deeper than pleasure, that fulfillment comes from consistency, from building something slowly with another human being who is just as imperfect and complicated as you are. And when you understand that, love stops being fragile and starts becoming solid, because real love doesn't collapse under pressure, it reveals character. And after marriage, character matters more than chemistry, because chemistry can carry you through attraction, through excitement, through early passion, but only character can carry you through silence, through grief, through financial stress, through emotional distance, through the moments when one of you is strong and the other is barely holding together. And commitment is the quiet agreement that when one falls behind, the other doesn't walk ahead alone, doesn't shame, doesn't keep score, but slows down, reaches back, and says, "Move together," because commitment isn't about equality in every moment. It's about loyalty across all moments. And loyalty doesn't mean blind obedience or losing yourself. It means choosing honesty over avoidance, choosing hard conversations over comfortable distance, choosing growth over ego, because love isn't meant to preserve who you were before marriage. It's meant to mature who you become after it. And that maturity doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from daily decisions, from apologizing without defending yourself, from listening without preparing a rebuttal, from admitting when you're wrong, even when you could technically be right. Because commitment asks you to care more about the relationship than about winning. And that's not weakness, that's strength. The kind of strength that doesn't need to dominate to feel secure, the kind that doesn't raise its voice to feel heard, the kind that knows that love isn't proven by how loudly you feel, but by how steadily you stay. And after we marry, staying won't always be romantic. Sometimes it will feel boring, repetitive, even frustrating, but boredom isn't the enemy of love, neglect is, and repetition isn't the enemy of passion. Disconnection is, because the truth is that love deepens through familiarity, not novelty, through knowing someone's patterns, their triggers, their fears, their fiercery, and still choosing to be gentle, still choosing to protect, still choosing to see them as a partner, not a problem, because commitment isn't the promise that nothing will ever go wrong. It's the promise that when things do go wrong, we won't abandon each other emotionally, we won't weaponize silence, we won't use distance as punishment, we won't turn love into leverage, because commitment is not conditional on convenience. It's anchored in values, and values are what remain when emotions fluctuate, when attraction evolves, when life reshapes you both in ways you didn't anticipate. And that's another truth people don't like to admit. Marriage doesn't freeze people in time, it changes them, it exposes them, it challenges them. And commitment means allowing each other to grow without fear, without control, without resentment. Because loving someone isn't about owning them, it's about creating a space where both of you can become more honest, more grounded, more emotionally aware. And that kind of love doesn't rush, doesn't demand perfection, doesn't collapse at the first sign of discomfort. It understands that frustration doesn't mean failure, conflict doesn't mean incompatibility, and distance doesn't mean the end. Sometimes it just means someone needs patience instead of pressure, presence instead of performance, because commitment is not proven when things are easy. It's revealed when things are ordinary, when things are heavy, when things are unclear. And after we marry, there will be days when love feels simple and days when it feels like work you didn't clock in for. But the work is sacred because you're not just maintaining a relationship, you're shaping a shared life. And that requires humility. The humility to admit you don't always know what you're doing, the humility to ask for help, the humility to learn your partner instead of assuming you already understand them, because people change. And commitment means staying curious, staying attentive, staying emotionally available, not just physically present, because presence without connection is just proximity, and commitment asks for more than that. It asks for awareness, for empathy, for the courage to show up fully even when you're afraid of being seen. Because love isn't about being impressive, it's about being real, and real love doesn't demand constant excitement. It asks for consistency, and consistency is what builds trust, and trust is what allows love to feel safe, and safety is what allows love to last, because at the end of the day, commitment is not a restriction, it's a choice to invest deeply rather than endlessly search, to build roots instead of chasing sparks, to say, this person with all their flaws and all their strengths is worth my patience, my effort, my loyalty, and that decision, made quietly and repeatedly, is what transforms love from a feeling into a foundation, from a moment into a lifetime. Healing inside a marriage is not a dramatic event where pain disappears overnight. It's a slow, deliberate practice of staying open when closing off would feel safer. Because after we marry, we don't just bring love into the relationship, we bring history, habits, fears, unhealed wounds, and expectations we didn't even realize we were carrying. And forgiveness becomes less about grand apologies and more about daily restraint, about choosing not to punish your partner for pain they didn't cause, but accidentally touched. Because no matter how deeply we love each other, we will disappoint one another, not always through betrayal or cruelty, but through misunderstanding, distraction, exhaustion, and emotional clumsiness. And healing begins when we stop treating those moments as proof that love is failing and start seeing them as invitations to grow more emotionally honest. Because forgiveness is not pretending something didn't hurt. It's acknowledging the hurt without letting it turn into bitterness. And bitterness is quiet. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It settles into tone, into distance, into the way we stop asking questions and start making assumptions. And marriage doesn't survive on assumptions. It survives on curiosity, on the willingness to ask what's really going on inside you, instead of saying, you always do this. Because healing requires safety, and safety is built when your partner knows they can be imperfect without being abandoned, that they can admit fault without being humiliated, that they can struggle without being seen as a burden. And choosing someone daily means understanding that love is not a one-time decision made at the altar. It's a series of small choices made when you're tired, irritated, misunderstood, or emotionally distant. Choices like speaking gently when sarcasm would be easier, listening fully when you want to interrupt, apologizing without conditions, forgiving without keeping a record, because healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel close and steady. Other days, old wounds will resurface without warning, triggered by stress, by words spoken too quickly, by silence that feels heavier than it should. And choosing someone daily means not panicking when those moments appear, not labeling them as failure, but recognizing them as part of the process of two imperfect people learning how to love each other more wisely. Because marriage doesn't erase pain, it gives you a partner to walk through it with, and that walk requires patience. Because healing can't be rushed, it can't be demanded, and it can't be forced through logic alone. Sometimes healing needs time, sometimes it needs reassurance, sometimes it needs space, and emotional maturity is knowing the difference, knowing when to lean in and when to step back, and knowing when to speak and when to simply sit beside your partner without trying to fix them. Because not every wound needs advice, some just need presence. And forgiveness doesn't mean lowering your standards or tolerating harm. It means choosing repair over resentment. It means saying, I care more about understanding than about being right. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes the relationship stronger. Because unresolved pain doesn't disappear. It shows up later as distance, as defensiveness, as emotional withdrawal. And choosing someone daily means addressing those small fractures before they become walls. It means having hard conversations early with respect, not waiting until frustration turns into contempt, because contempt is what slowly erodes love, not conflict. And healing requires humility, the humility to admit that sometimes you are the one who hurt without intending to, that sometimes your silence caused more damage than words ever could. And forgiveness begins when accountability feels safer than denial, when both people know that mistakes won't be used as weapons later, because marriage is not a courtroom, it's a partnership. And partnerships thrive when both people are allowed to be human. And choosing someone daily also means choosing yourself in healthy ways, because healing doesn't happen when one person sacrifices their emotional well-being to keep the peace. It happens when both people feel respected, heard, and valued, and that balance takes practice. It takes learning how to express needs without blame, how to receive feedback without defensiveness, how to say, I'm hurt instead of hurt me, because language shapes connection, and connection is the soil where healing grows. And over time, those daily choices compound. Small acts of kindness rebuild trust, consistent honesty restores safety, gentle reassurance repairs insecurity, and forgiveness stops being a single act and becomes a shared culture, a quiet understanding that mistakes will be met with effort, not abandonment. And choosing someone daily means staying emotionally present even when life gets heavy, even when routine dulls excitement, even when external pressures drain your energy, because love isn't sustained by constant passion, it's sustained by reliability, by knowing your partner won't disappear when things get uncomfortable. And healing teaches you that love doesn't require perfection. It requires willingness to learn, to adapt, to soften, to keep showing up with an open heart. Because every day after marriage, you are given a choice to drift or to engage, to protect your ego or protect the bond, to rehearse old wounds or create new understanding. And when you choose engagement, when you choose forgiveness, not because it's easy, but because it's freeing, you create a relationship that doesn't just survive hardship. It becomes wiser because of it, stronger because of what it has endured, and deeper because both people chose to heal together rather than bleed on each other. And that is what it truly means to choose someone daily. Not blind loyalty, not self-erasure, but a steady commitment to growth, compassion, and emotional honesty. Even when it asks more of you than you expected, even when it requires you to become softer and stronger at the same time. Loyalty after we marry is no longer a dramatic declaration or a promise spoken once and remembered forever. It becomes a quiet way of living with another person, revealed in restraint more than in display. in what you protect rather than what you perform. Because real loyalty is not tested when everything feels aligned. It's tested when frustration shows up, when attraction to ease or escape whispers in the background, when life becomes heavy and the temptation to emotionally withdraw feels justified. And emotional maturity is what keeps loyalty intact during those moments, because maturity understands that love is not just about staying physically present, it's about remaining emotionally faithful, not sharing the most vulnerable parts of yourself with places or people that do not belong to the relationship, not seeking validation elsewhere when reassurance could be built at home, because loyalty begins internally, in thought, in intention, in the way you speak about your partner when they are not in the room, and respect is the foundation that makes that loyalty sustainable. Because without respect, love turns into tolerance, and tolerance eventually becomes resentment. But respect means seeing your partner as an equal, not as a role, not as an obligation, not as someone who exists to meet your needs, but as a whole human being with their own fears, boundaries, dreams, and limitations. And emotional maturity shows itself when you honor those things, even when they inconvenience you, even when they challenge your preferences, because respect is not agreement, it's consideration, and loyalty is not possession, it's protection, protection of your partner's dignity, protection of their vulnerabilities, protection of the bond you are building together, because marriage does not give you permission to be careless with someone's heart. It gives you responsibility. An emotionally mature love understands that trust is fragile, not because people are weak, but because intimacy makes us exposed. And when someone trusts you, they are handing you something irreplaceable, and loyalty is the choice to treat that trust with care, not using their insecurities against them, not mocking their fears, not dismissing their emotions as overreactions, because emotional maturity does not rush to judgment, it pauses, it listens, it asks questions before forming conclusions, and that pause is often the difference between conflict that strengthens and conflict that damages, because loyalty is also shown in how you argue, in whether you aim to resolve or to wound, in whether you keep the issue present or drag the past into the room as ammunition. And respect means you do not fight to win, you fight to understand, because winning an argument at the cost of safety is not a victory, it's a fracture. An emotionally mature love recognizes that tone matters as much as truth, that timing matters as much as honesty, and that silence, when used to punish, erodes trust faster than anger ever could, because loyalty is consistency of character, not perfection of behavior. And after we marry, there will be moments when one of you feels unseen, unappreciated, or emotionally alone, and loyalty in those moments looks like staying engaged rather than escaping, choosing dialogue over detachment, choosing effort over indifference, because indifference is the opposite of love, not hate, and respect means refusing to let indifference take root, refusing to let sarcasm replace kindness, refusing to let familiarity breed carelessness, because emotion matured understands that familiarity should deepen gentleness, not diminish it, and loyalty is also about accountability, about being willing to examine your own behavior without defensiveness, to acknowledge when you've crossed a line, to repair without minimizing the impact, because respect is not maintained by intentions, it's maintained by responsibility, and emotionally mature partners do not say, "That's just how I am," as an excuse to avoid growth. They say, "I didn't realize that hurt you, and I want to do better," because growth is the language of loyalty, and loyalty that refuses to evolve eventually becomes rigid, and rigidity suffocates connection, but loyalty that adapts, that learns, that softens creates safety, and safety is what allows love to breathe. And respect also means honoring boundaries, understanding that closeness does not mean entitlement, that marriage does not erase the need for individuality, and emotional maturity is knowing that a healthy bond is not two people fused together, but two people choosing each other while remaining whole, because loyalty is not about control, it's about trust, and trust grows when both people feel free rather than confined. And after we marry, life will test loyalty in subtle ways, not always through obvious betrayals, but through neglect, through complacency, through the slow erosion that happens when effort is replaced by assumption. And emotional maturity is recognizing those small shifts early, addressing them with humility rather than denial, because respect is proactive. It does not wait until damage is done to take responsibility, and loyalty is not proven in grand sacrifices alone. It is proven in daily attentiveness, in remembering what matters to your partner, in noticing when they are quieter than usual, in choosing to show up emotionally even when you are tired. Because love does not need constant intensity. It needs consistency is built through respect, through maturity, through the quiet decision to be someone your partner can rely on, not just when things are good, but when they are uncertain, uncomfortable, or demanding. And at its core, loyalty is not about fear of loss. It is about devotion to values like honesty, kindness, responsibility, and presence. And emotional maturity is what allows those values to guide behavior, even when emotions fluctuate, even when attraction evolves, even when life reshapes the relationship in unexpected ways. Because love that lasts is not driven by impulse. It is guided by integrity. And integrity is the quiet strength of doing what protects the relationship, even when no one else would ever know. And that kind of loyalty, grounded in respect and emotional maturity, does not create a loud or dramatic love. It creates a steady one, a love that feels safe to grow in, a love that does not demand perfection but expects effort, a love that does not fear change because it is rooted in trust. And that is the kind of love that endures, not because it is untested, but because it is built on the quiet, daily choice to honor one another with maturity, respect, and unwavering loyalty.